Good morning, everyone. I am glad to see that quite a bit of participants are on the call right now. Thank you to everybody that's introducing themselves, placing their district or their ESC regions in the chat. I'm going to give a couple more minutes before we go ahead and get started for PTECH Planning and Implementation, Decision 9A. Great, like to see lots of ESC support in the chat and in the participants coming in, lots of different districts, lots of new names and faces. We're very excited about that in supporting a lot of new campuses to our CCRSM network as a whole. As a quick reminder, we are currently doing our Decision 9A webinar at this time. Today is a PTECH kind of day, so we will be having lots of webinars regarding Decision 9 as a whole, but currently you are in the Decision 9A PTECH Planning and Implementation webinar. I'm going to give one more minute before we go ahead and get started. Go Hounds. I see a lot of really great school spirit in the chat as well. Very excited. It is football season. So I do hear a lot of cheers and go to some football games. It's great to see all those activities and school spirit this early in the morning. Okay, well, we have almost 100 people in the chat and the participant group. Very excited about that. I'm going to go ahead and get started. As a reminder, we are currently in Decision 9A PTECH Planning and Implementation TCLAS Initiative Kickoff webinar. So please keep in mind that we will be speaking strictly to that decision point. There are other webinars today for PTECH, but currently we are only talking about Decision 9A at this time. So first and foremost, welcome and congratulations on receiving your award. My name is Crystal Garza, and I'm the coordinator of College and Career Readiness School Models within the Division of College, Career, and Military Preparation. So for anyone on the call that works really heavily with counseling or career technical education or advanced academics, that's the particular division that many of those initiatives are housed in. So hoping that we've got a lot of familiarity with that, because I do know from our award list that many of the campuses, the majority of the campuses have not had the experience of our CCRSM network. So also welcome to our CCRSM network. We're happy to have you and excited to be giving you all an opportunity to be entering into the PTECH network through TCLAS. And I also wanted to make sure to mention that being a part of the CCRSM network, we do have a specific mailbox. If you've been emailing the ptech@tea.texas.gov mailbox, not a problem. They all filter into that same mailbox. So please feel free to send any questions to that mailbox for anything CCRSM, College and Career Readiness School Model related. So our agenda and FYIs for today's webinar, we just did some welcomes and some introductions. We're going to go a little bit more in depth into the PTECH models because we do know that we have quite a bit of new campuses coming in new districts. We're going to talk about some of the award next steps. We did talk about this at our previous webinar, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the expectations for the next couple of months and how we're going to filter out some technical assistance support to you all very soon as we work that out. some decision-specific deep dives. So we do know that because a lot of you are new to our network, there are some pieces that we need to re-emphasize so that we make sure that all of you are very familiar with the pieces that you need to start planning to launch your PTECHs. And again, recap those next steps. We know that TCLAS is a bit of a whirlwind in the middle of a fall semester. So we want to make sure that you're aware of what the next steps are and then where to reach us if you do need support on those next steps. Please make sure to ask questions and drop them into the Q&A answer box in Zoom. I'm also not averse to the chat box that we currently have going on. I'll be monitoring those as I present to hopefully get those questions and answers as close to what we're talking about as possible. We are currently recording this webinar, and the slides will be posted on the tea.texas.gov/TCLAS website after this webinar concludes. One question I did get in the chat is, how does our district know if we were awarded? So working with the TCLAS team here at TEA, there were letters that did go out via email to each specific district. That point of, it might have been one point of contact and or your superintendent that was included in that email. We did ask for the information for some of the points of contacts. So please make sure to reach out to whomever may have submitted the final TCLAS application, whomever's kind of been that point of contact, to make sure that you know what you were awarded for TCLAS, because we have about 15 decision points, and it just varies across the TCLAS initiative, what awards got what based off of their criteria. So please make sure that you're aware. And then let me also make sure, because more people have entered the chat, that this particular webinar is only speaking to Decision 9A for PTECH Planning and Implementation. So just double checking, because it is a PTECH kind of day. So some TCLAS next steps kind of speaks to what we were just answering just now. You've already should have completed your award confirmation survey and recommitted to those program assurances. We will be going over the specific PTECH 9A program assurances today. So you'll get a refresher on that. But we do know that you have completed that survey already. Currently, you're in the webinar for program onboarding for Decision 9A, PTECH Planning and Implementation. So you're attending this kickoff webinar. Like we mentioned, it is recorded, so please make sure to share this with whomever's on your PTECH team that couldn't make it. And we will also be sending out a PDF attachment of your award confirmation survey. We'll be going over some of those pieces today as well. So you do have a little bit of a timeline there between 13th and the 21st. That third step is completing the eGrants application. So all of the TCLAS grant initiatives are going to be housed in the eGrants portal. If anyone isn't familiar on the call, because they're a little bit more programs based, we are going to talk about webinar times to familiarize yourselves. A lot of your business offices are very familiar with the eGrants platform, so definitely find that partner that can walk you through that. So you're going to want to complete that eGrants application to receive your notice of grant award. So that NOGA, you're going to want to make sure to complete the eGrants in order to get that funding out. That deadline will open in about mid-September, so we're nearly there, and it will close in October 29th. So you'll have about a month and a half to be able to complete that eGrants application. Some additional supports that you have is that eGrant calculator that is already available, and that gives me a great segue into mentioning our onboarding webinar schedule. So currently you are in the 9A at 9 a.m. We have the Decision 9B PTECH Success at 10:30. So I know I saw a lot of familiar districts in the chat. Just if you did get 9B or 9C, just know that we are going to be talking about only 9A from 9 to 10. Today, we also have that decision 9C from 1 to 2, and decisions 2A and 2C will be for CRIMSI and SAVL will be later today as well. So a very jam-packed webinar scheduling day. If you'll notice, there are a couple of e-grant specific webinars. One of them is happening tomorrow from 9 to 10, and some office hours. So how you found the webinar registration for this particular webinar on the TCLAS website, you'll go ahead and go and look for the recordings and the slides for all these webinars, but also register for the other ones. So like we mentioned, those e-grant specific supports for the webinar tomorrow from 9 to 10, next week on Friday from 9 to 10 for the office hours. So if you have specific questions, and if you don't, that's okay. If you want to just kind of listen to some of the other questions people have, that's a great strategy as well. And I believe we'll be having office hours for e-grant support through October 29th, which I believe is around the deadline for the e-grants application submission. And here's another optional webinar screen. We really want to make sure that you all understand the e-grants, because that is where you'll be receiving that NOGA award, which is very critical for you all to spend out that money, which we really encourage you to do. So for the Decision 9A PTECH Planning and Implementation, we want to give a deep dive because, again, we do know that many of the award recipients, all of them, do not have prior PTECH experience. They may have neighboring communities that do, but we wanted to make sure to emphasize what exactly PTECH could mean, the purpose of it, and some of the benefits of it. So at a larger name, it is a mouthful, Pathways in Technology, Early College, High School. So you'll hear us say the acronym PTECH quite a bit. It's a national term, it's a local Texas term, but the purpose of these models are to provide a transitional experience for students from high school to post-secondary education to employment. So many of you may be considering transitioning some of your CTE-based programs of study into a PTECH. Maybe some of you are building out some of those CTE program of study components throughout the 2 years that you are with us to start serving students as a PTECH. So it really runs the gamut of support that you all are already giving to your students, perhaps. But at the core, some core values is that PTECH seeks to serve students who are at risk through an open enrollment and no cost to students model. So I know I get a lot of questions on that particular point, and we'll talk about it a little bit more at the partnership point, because many of your partners for institutions of higher education might already have dual credit models where you already have a cost point for each student. So those are the kinds of considerations that we think about while we're planning for 2 years. And we will support you through that planning, of course. An opportunity to earn post-secondary credentials and/or industry-based certifications. I mean, that includes up to an associate degree where it's appropriate, credentials, certificates, certifications. So really being intentional about what your program will offer to your potential students. Like I mentioned, that partnership component of having a memorandum of understanding with an institution of higher education and having a memorandum of understanding with a business partner to ensure that there's a triangle of support for launching these PTECH academies that you'll be doing for about 2 years. One of the questions that I got is if there's a resource page on this particular PowerPoint. Yep, I'm going to be pinpointing you to a couple of places where you can get more information on PTECH. Alignment to regional workforce needs. So making sure that already at the CTE level, you're taking a look at what that local need is. And PTECH is just reinforcing that as you're building out your programs. Are the programs that you're offering to students feeding into that pipeline of workforce that's needed in your area? work-based learning at every grade level. And again, we do support you through ideas of how to implement work-based learning that might not necessarily be tied to a practicum or a capstone, which is what we really look at, because we know that at that point students are very mature. But what kind of opportunities are you offering that you might already be doing for your students, and not realizing that that's actually work-based learning. And then the final piece that kind of makes a PTECH is the opportunity to provide up to 6 years to earn a high school diploma and or whatever credential or certification or degree you're offering. A big question I get on this is, do I have to hold my students for the whole 6 years? That is a local decision that you all as your partners, your school districts will make. Legislatively, we allow a campus to support that student through 6 years as a PTECH high school student. And we get these questions a lot. So if there's any specific ones that you ever feel that you need to reach out to us for, please feel free to email the PTECH mailbox, because we want to make sure that the school district makes the best decision for them locally. So how are we connecting PTECH to that high school to college and career? So we mentioned a lot of the career technical education, CTE's programs of study, but legislatively, we do have a couple of Texas Education Code and administrative code pieces that really fortify all of the information that I just mentioned. And going back to the whole triangle idea of support, we do have a college partner that is required and an industry partner. So it's really hitting the post-secondary education component and the post-secondary workforce component and partnering with that school district partner, which is you all. I did have a great question about a higher ed institution. Is it required to be a 4-year college or university? We have a lot of great partners that are just 2 years because they are community college or college based. So it can definitely be a college. They don't have to have, we don't have a requirement of it being strictly a 2-year versus a 4-year, as long as they are SACS COC accredited and they are accredited to teach as a community college or university, they're perfectly fine to be an institution that partners with you. So connecting that high school to college and career, like I mentioned before, it's open enrollment and no cost to the students. That typically means dual credit components. So just keep that in mind. Like I mentioned for that MOU, it's important to figure out, you'll have 2 years to figure out what that cost agreement will be between you and your partner. Again, hammering down that tuition-free college class component and work-based training, and providing the student with an opportunity to earn up to 60 hours of college credit and or an industry certification, a certificate, which is different, and an associate degree and or an associate degree. It just depends on how you as a district and your partners want to approach the particular program you want to study. We're not requiring you to make sure that you have a program that does an IBC and a certificate and associate degree. We want to work with you to make sure that you are offering what you need to based off of your need. Again, some program fundamentals and really hammering it down. We're really hammering down that triangular approach to partnership, because it's really important that your partners are on board with what the vision is for your PTECH Academy, especially when we know that you're going to be receiving a lot of the dual credit support from a college or university partner. So that is incredibly critical. And it directly ties to those CCMR accountabilities and those outcome bonuses. So again, for a PTECH program to truly be a PTECH program, you need to make sure you have a workforce partnership that's aligning to the pathway that you're choosing, making sure that that business partner is a reflection of the program of study that you're offering. making sure that you have a memorandum of understanding or an agreement with them so that they understand that there is work-based learning involved for students that might not traditionally have been considered to get it. And if applicable, after a student completes the program and there's an opportunity for a workforce partner to hire them, that they would be considered for interviewing for a position. And for the higher ed partnerships, it's kind of runs a similar gamut with requiring an MOU with that IHE partner. A question that I often get is, who develops that MOU? And that's a part of the training that you'll get over the 2 years. Often can be a collaborative piece. Many of the colleges across the state already have dual credit programs, and they have MOUs that are aligned to our legislative mandates for what an MOU looks like. But we do want to emphasize that as school districts, definitely voice your concerns or what needs to be put into the MOUs as you're reviewing them at the district level. So making sure to remind about that. Again, emphasizing that your higher ed partner is that partner for your college credit, and that PTECH specifically wants you to identify what credentials, certificates, or certifications or associate degree pieces are you all seeking to give to your students, and are your partners aware of it? Just from the field, sometimes, you might not settle on a program of study until, a little bit later in your planning year, and you kind of have to backtrack a little bit about what exactly are the goals. And so definitely in your 2 years, you want to hammer down what opportunities for dual credit are you going to want to offer to your campuses. I had a great comment that one of the participants mentioned that they have a community college partner and a four-year partner. You're absolutely free to partner with as many IHE partners as you feel is necessary for your PTECH program. There's no particular limit. So I'm glad that they have a little system between a community college and a four-year, which we definitely encourage. Oop. Let me just make sure to answer this question while we're talking about partnerships. So the question was, are there any sample work-based MOUs? I believe we might have a couple on our interactive college career readiness school model blueprint. We're working to get more resources onto that website. So I'll direct you to that at the end when we have a slide about resources to hopefully get you some examples of what that looks like. So some of the benefits, because currently you have been funded through the support of the TCLAS initiative. We also wanted to highlight some additional funding components that you might already actually be using for some of your CTE programs, but something a little bit more specific to the PTECH campuses and the greater CCRSM network is that we do provide technical assistance at no cost to your particular campuses. So the technical assistance that you receive, you are required to work with them. I haven't had a protest about working with any of our technical assistance providers yet. They're great. They have a coaching system of people that have been implementing PTECHs, early colleges, and TSTEMs for quite a bit of time. So, having an extra pair of hands to help you through for 2 years while you're planning is always a great plus while you're building this out completely, because we do know that the majority of you have not necessarily opened a PTECH or a campus like this. We also offer that peer-to-peer collaboration through the technical assistance providers that we will have. Lots of professional development that will be coming your way through convenings and meetings. We're excited to be able to offer a lot of these pieces virtually and via recording. and they will be linked in a place for you to easily access all of those pieces. So we haven't started our cycle for the upcoming academic year for professional development yet or site visits, but we will very soon as we work to onboard some of our newer technical assistance providers as well. And lastly, a lot of feedback and support. So I can't emphasize enough, PTECH Academies, you have your IHE partner and your workforce partner, but it definitely takes a village of teachers, counselors, and principals that are on board with the vision of the PTECH Academy being at your particular district. For that additional funding that you might already be utilizing, the weighted funding for CTE and tech apps courses, IBC reimbursement, and college prep exam reimbursement. One thing that currently you're not benefiting from, but in that 23-24 school year, you will see that $50 per student applied via that PEAMS indicator, again, once you're serving those students. I did have a question about the TCLAS amount of money that we've received. Some examples of what that money is to pay for, where the area that money is coming from, and if it has different rules for ESSER funds. Let me double check and see if the next slide is about funding. It's not. So I'm gonna bookmark that question for when we're on the funding slide, but that's a great question. It is quite a bit of money for 3 years. How do we disperse that? So I'll make sure to answer that on that particular slide. So the PTECH Blueprint is that guiding document that we're all centered around. So TCLAS has a grant, has guidelines, there's PTECH assurances, and one of them is making sure that the point of contacts and everyone building the PTECH Academy is familiar with the blueprint. So you'll find that within that blueprint, there are a lot of really great benchmarks that outline the minimum of what should be you should be using to build up that PTECH, which stems anywhere from school design, target population, what are the kinds of students that you're recruiting for your campuses, strategic alliances, which is that partnership piece, curriculum instruction and assessment, which is that course-driven piece, what exactly are you offering for programs of study, work-based learning, which is a big component that ties to that workforce partner that you have, and student support, which is likely a lot of the activities and support that you already offer your students, but how are you enhancing that for a PTECH model? And school design, which focuses a little bit more on the structure, professional development pieces, how are you supporting the building of PTECH overall? And at the final piece of that PTECH blueprint are our outcomes-based measures. So like in any system that we put out, we want to have goals for our campuses to hit. So we do have access, which speaks a little bit to that target population. Are the students you're recruiting a reflection of your district? Because that's what we want to see in these models. Achievement, which is looking a little bit closer at some of those CCMR goals for TSIA, for STAR testing, components like that, readiness, college and career readiness, and attainment, which focuses a bit more on what can that student leave your program with. We do have a link that should be active once these slides are posted to the PTECH Blueprint itself, but we also have a link in the resources below. Again, we wanted to emphasize that blueprint design element. The blueprint is our guiding document, but we know that there's so much more to building a campus, whether it's a standalone and you're serving all the students, or it's a school within a school, you already have the structure built, you're just specializing the academy and the students that you're serving. So this is a great kind of a snapshot view for anybody that needs to know PTECH Blueprint design really quickly as you're building your leadership teams and who's going to help you create this PTECH Academy. So just emphasizing again that school design component from benchmark 1, touching on open enrollment, flexible scheduling, professional development, target population, that recruitment, an enrollment piece that's so critical, having a good relationship with your middle schools, of course, strategic alliances, which we've talked a lot about, partnerships, curriculum instruction and assessment, making sure that we're keeping focused on what our post-secondary outcomes are and how that relates to what we're teaching in the classroom, work-based learning for every grade level, and student supports, which are those wraparound strategies and services. So for the PTECH recommended activities, some of these activities for planning specifically, which you'll be doing for about 2 years, it'll definitely be a time where you'll want to make sure that if you have to plan for curriculum mapping that you might not already have, and this is specifically for those campuses that might not already have a strong CTE program of study, or they want to enhance it, or they don't currently offer them, it would be really good idea to start thinking about those kinds of activities to spend your money on top of, equipment and materials. Depending on your program of study, you might need to order those materials very much in advance. So consider that as you are thinking about how to spend that money in the first 2 years. I don't believe it's on here specifically, but the money, you are allowed to use that for travel, which kind of falls into that professional development component, because sometimes you do have to travel to go visit other academies within the network to kind of get an idea of what you might need. Supporting a work-based learning liaison, you might need to supplement a position for PTECH at the district or at the campus level. So these are really good examples of what you could be using for your planning time. For implementation, it looks a little bit different. Obviously, you're still going to be needing to buy a little bit more supplies and materials, but there's some things to consider, like textbooks, which can definitely be a cost that is very difficult for campuses to kind of budget for. So thinking ahead to what kind of textbooks you'll need for the particular program, as well as transportation. That's a piece that I know a lot of our PTECH academies do put quite a bit of money to, because they will be taking the students to the work sites for certain activities, or to the actual IHE partner to start doing, one class for dual credit, perhaps. Something that might be used less frequently, but for anybody bringing in 11th or 12th grade students into their PTECH and doing a full model, they can use that for certification and licensing fees in that 3rd year. So if you do have students that are already ready for that. So getting back to that question for what the source of the funding is, this money is coming from general revenue. So that's the state-minded money. So keep that in mind. It does have slightly different rules than ESSER funding, because ESSER funding is federal. So you do have a little bit more leeway there. The general rule of thumb is if it's for PTECH specific activities and you want to double check on the TEA website for general activities, and I can put that link in the chat to that budgeting document. I actually referenced that one quite a bit. It is for federal money, but I find it's very helpful in trying to plan for what's allowable versus not allowable. But for the most part, most of the items on here are allowable with the funding. The grant is state funded. So through the eGrants application, you will receive the funding for all 3 years that you will be with the grant. So you're not just going to receive some money in the beginning for 2 years and then the final year money for the last year, you will receive the 400,000 lump sum to distribute over the 3 years. It's for the entire span. So the question was, is the money we receive now just for the 2 planning years? No, it's for the span of 3 years. So when you're planning on where to spend your money with those cost codes for payroll, professional development, supplies and materials, other components and capital outlay, you'll be planning that out over 3 years. So for example, if you were to put a certain amount of money for professional development, we would know that you would be doing a couple of those purchases in the first or second or third year. If you put supplies and materials, we know that, sometimes, or specialized equipment, we know that sometimes you have to order in advance. So that might be a second year purchase. So keep that in mind as you all are thinking about how to distribute that 400,000 over time. And then there is a building retrofit question. I'm going to make sure to get that budget document in the chat because I believe that there are some really great there's some really great guidance in the budget document that I'll be putting into the chat for you all to know where to get that information from specifically. Let's make sure I get that before I move on, because this is a really critical time for you all, for your teams to start budgeting a little bit more. Really great and pointed questions. It is really important to get these going. And again, we will be posting this PowerPoint on the TCLAS website. I went ahead and put that budgeting cost guidance handbook in the chat for you all. So some specific 9A PTECH planning and implementation pieces. These slides might look very familiar from the previous webinar that we had, but we really wanted to hammer down some of the components of the requirements. You were asked to identify a new PTECH campus. I do want to address from the pot of decision 9 for PTECH, we did have to make some adjustments to how many campuses we were able to award. So each district that was awarded the PTECH 9A was approved to support one PTECH campus with the $400,000. So we will be following up with you soon through our own portal to identify which particular campus, to give you and your district a little bit of time to identify which campus you would like to move forward to. Oh, the link is not coming up in the chat. Before they post this to the TCLAS website, I will make sure that there is a link to the budgeting cost guidance handbook before they post it up. So hopefully anybody that can grab it from the chat is able to do so, but if they can't, I will make sure to link that document in the PDF in the recording. So again, if you were approved for a 9A, you were approved for one campus. So again, you do have time to have that discussion with your partners and with your district to see which campus in particular will be moving forward to be supported through TCLAS. The timeline still remains for planning with a technical assistance provider in late fall into early midwinter. We are working to make sure to secure technical assistance support for this particular initiative. In the interim, please send us your questions if you have them to our CCRSM mailbox as we're working to get you a specific coach. And implementing with students in 22, 23, 22, 24. Yes, it is for one campus. Again, emphasizing that 400,000 solid, there were no other award amounts for that. It's just a solid 400,000 for the life of 2021 to 2024, with planning being 21 to 22 and 22 to 23, and implementing with students in 23, 24. There was a question in the chat about implementing much sooner than the 2 years. Officially for a PTECH, you'll receive that official PTECH designation that you're serving students in 23, 24. If you're already a school district that is serving students through a PTECH-like program, you can continue serving them. They won't be official PTECH students until 23, 24. So that benefit of that $50 per student won't apply in 22, 23 if you plan for 1 year versus the 2 years that you're planning with us. We don't want to limit that you want to serve students as PTECH, but we do ask that the funding stays consistent with the implementation with students in 23, 24. So again, we don't want to limit what you're already doing, but for official purposes for PTECH designation, you will be considered a PTECH campus in 23, 24. So just emphasizing some of the PTECH tenets, but that are specific to this particular TCLAS grant for PTECH. We wanted to support campuses to plan to establish the foundational elements of a PTECH program. I mean, it goes to that question about starting a little bit sooner. Traditionally, we have campuses planned for a year. And right now we have it for 2 years, which probably makes a lot of higher ed partners really happy, so they can have a long track to support the students. And I see it more of of definitely a positive to plan for that long. I know a lot of districts really want to hit the ground running with implementing a PTECH. But planning is definitely an important part because you have 2 different partners. You're building those through that support with our technical assistance provider. You're identifying that regional labor market, which introduces almost another partner of making sure that you're talking to the right chambers of commerce and organizations that will help you identify that, making sure that you identified the right career cluster. We often have campuses that might decide to add in another program of study that they like to support with PTECH, or change the program of study to suit better what the community needs are. So planning and also planning for those student services, which can be very time consuming, especially if you haven't been implementing work-based learning previously. And again, emphasizing serving those students in 23, 24. Some key assurances to make sure that you and your team are aware of some of the assurances that you're signing up for through the TCLAS grant specifically and receiving this funding. You're participating in that planning period. So that 2021, which we're currently in for fall, through that 2023 school year, you're sending an application with information. I want to emphasize that this is for us to gather more information about what kind of PTECH you're starting, and not for us to say you're not going to receive the funding. This is just a portal for us to collect more information. It's very much a formality, but we made it an assurance because we wanted to make sure that we got as much information from you all as possible as you all are planning to build out these PTECHs. Working with our technical assistance providers during the grant period. Throughout that time, you'll be asked to self-evaluate. Our technical assistance providers do a really great job of making sure that you have check-in points throughout the year, and that you're providing feedback to yourselves and to them to make sure that you're getting what you need, that you're adhering to the legislative language. at the core, that's where PTECH has stemmed from, which is through legislation, which has provided a lot of opportunity for campuses to run this programming, and that you, when it's appropriate in 23-24, begin to start serving students in grades 9 through 12, or will begin to scale up, start serving students in 9th grade for the first time, or 9 through 10, whatever your model will be, and progressively scale up by adding 1 grade level. So if you're already running a high school and you're adding a PTECH, you're going perfectly fine. If you are a campus that doesn't currently serve grade 9, but the intention is to do so, you need to do so at least by 23-24 to continue with the programming. So some timeline pieces, we are currently in that PTECH planning phase. As many of you have already accepted your TCLAS award for 9A. We will be opening that PTECH planning portal very soon. I know the application name can make it seem like, again, that you have to apply for the funding again, but it's a formality because we need to collect as much information about your planning as possible. But you will receive an email notification from us with all of the details of what you need to do and to submit. And we're going to go over some of the components in just a minute. And just at a high level, that PTECH implementation piece, this is a great snapshot for you to have so you and your team can see, like, when does this TCLAS funding end? And what are some of the major milestones along the way? So let's just focus on that planning component for right now and get into some of the next steps. So one of the questions asked about resources, we have an interactive blueprint. We also have a PDF copy because we know that people like to write on them, make their own notes, but we do now offer a virtual platform to capture the resources that get developed throughout the year. We've been working with people to develop some components, as well as some campuses and districts and higher ed partners that are really good at putting together their academies. So it's a virtual platform that actually puts the resources where they belong to each benchmark, so you can have a better idea of what resources, some examples. There was a question about sample MOUs. I believe we do have some up on that particular platform currently. So there's a separate landing page for each type of model, early college PTECH and T-STEM, and it goes over the same elements of the blueprint with enhanced areas for you to be able to look and see if there's resources for that particular document. So the application that I mentioned, the portal, it is through our Texas CCRSM designation website. It's currently not open for applications or collecting the information. Like I mentioned, we will be getting that information to you via a mass email for you to start the next steps. However, I did want to make sure to include this website so that whoever's on your team can be familiarized with it, take a look around it. There are some an archive of older applications that have been submitted previously. That function is on the website. So it's a great place to kind of look at what questions have been sent before, so you can be aware. And I'm actually going to skip to this one, this section right here, so you can get an idea of what kind of information we're asking about. At a high level, we want to know some background information. So this is where we'll collect which application and which campus in particular you will be moving forward with. Some contact information. So for TCLAS, we did ask for superintendent and I believe one TCLAS representative. The contact information section will be an opportunity for you to expand on who will need to provide information for PTECH specifically, and contact information for any of your other partners like your IHE or your workforce. I'm hoping that the word narrative does not scare too many people. Narrative usually just means, for example, what career cluster and program of study are you hoping to put forward with this PTECH Academy? And there's lots of drop downs and options for you to choose from. There's not a lot of essay questions because we have to process them and know all the information about your campuses very quickly. So another great example is a question for work-based learning that just asks, what would you like to intend to offer for work-based learning in 9th grade or 10th grade? And it's more of we just want to know what you might be doing and what you intend to do in the future. So it's not too intimidating, I hope. But again, there are older applications on the website for you to take a look at some of those questions. An assurance document, which is just to make sure that your partners are aware that you will be intend to plan on a PTECH Academy, and then a final submission. I'm gonna make sure that you all know how to register for an account, even though the application is not up yet. And we will be having a webinar specific to the planning, and that will be in an email that will be sent out to you. Registering for an account, on the main web page, there's a button to click on for register. You can go ahead and create that account, first name, last name, email, create a password for yourself, select the district that you would like to associate your account with. After you've registered, you will receive an email. Please keep in mind, it does take a second to get that confirmation. We often have districts have trouble getting that confirmation. Sometimes it goes to spam or your junk folder. So just make sure to check everywhere. Firewalls definitely are working for that registration. Please be aware. But again, we will be going over that more specifically in a different webinar that you'll receive access to. Wanted to make sure to emphasize to sign up for our newsletter because that's where we send a lot of critical information out to the field. Like I mentioned, we do have CCRSM and PTECH specific web resources, as well as we have a lot of websites for you to look at. There's the QR code for the CCRSM specific one. But I did want to make sure to get to some questions at the end, but also emphasize that the TCLAS initiative is an incredibly great opportunity. But like I mentioned before, it is 15 initiatives strong. You're embarking on opening a PTECH Academy from the ground up for a lot of districts, doing a lot of heavy lifting for a huge impact on your district that we recognize has been rocked by the circumstances from COVID and that learning acceleration. So we definitely want to emphasize that we're here to support you all through all of this because it's going to take a lot of time and effort from a lot of different people across your region, across your localities. So if after today's webinar, you have a conversation with your district and your partners and feel that you need to reach out to the TCLAS team to see what some of your options are for committing to some of the requirements and assurances, please reach out to tclas@tea.texas.gov. We understand, and again, it's already ramping up to be the middle of fall, even though we are in September. And so we're open to having just a really great conversation with districts to make sure that they're on point for hitting those requirements and assurances. So we just want to make sure that you know that that's available to you all. So some next steps, again, lots of stuff that we've completed, a lot of information today that we tried to pack in, but I think we're finally going to make it to some of the more pressing questions for 9A specifically. Some of the homework that our TCLAS leaders wanted to remind of was that additional onboarding from that award confirmation survey. Please also review the content in this webinar, and please be on the lookout for those e-grant application components. Want to emphasize, thank you very much for being on the call. We did have quite a bit of participants that are still hanging on for some questions right now. But for TCLAS specific questions or anything with e-grants, if you're having trouble, please reach out to that email. For decision point specific questions for PTECH, you can go ahead and send it to that particular email below as well. I'm going to start answering some questions here. So one question for grants funding pieces is, can this be used for general uses? So they brought up the cost code 6100, 6200, 6300, and 6400. And they also mentioned capital outlay. Is that allowable? Yes, that is definitely allowable. I believe PTECH is one of the TCLAS initiatives that is the most flexible to how it gets spent, as long as it is specifically for PTECH purposes. There are no checkpoints with this initiative. So the question is, there are other TCLAS initiatives that have checkpoints. Do we get the lump sum of 400,000 now, or is it periodically by academic year? You do receive that lump sum of 400,000 once the NOGAs are awarded in e-grants. So one of the questions was, you're in planning for 2 years before you're an official PTECH campus, and can start spending the money sooner in preparation for serving students. And the answer is yes, you can do that. By 23-24, will there be additional grant money, or do we need to plan wisely with the current award for that year? Yes, you will need to plan for the entirety 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24 with the 400,000. Currently, we are still working through settling the technical assistance with some of our providers. My best estimate for receiving technical assistance might be late in this fall semester, which is pretty similar to the timeline of receiving your e-grants NOGA through that portal. So just keep that in mind, that those timelines are going to be very connected to each other. Let me go back up. Trying to find where I left off. Okay, what the re-emphasizing, the technical assistance provider will be provided in the late fall as we work to solidify the partners that we do have. And in the interim, please don't hesitate to send us the specific questions to ptech@tea.texas.gov. So how will you be notified about your technical assistance? We will be sending out emails to the points of contacts that we have for TCLAS PTECH. And in turn, they will also be reaching out to you all once they have assigned coaches for you all. I see the 9B issue. I'm gonna post that Zoom info in the chat. You know what, to the person that can't get the 9B information, please email the ptech@ta.texas.gov. I have the copied 9B registration information, and I can send it to you from that email. The application will follow the same timeline as a typical planning application. That November deadline still stands. If you are registered for another webinar, you would have received a confirmation in the emails that you specified. So one of the questions for the grant application is completing a specific PTECH application at the website that we linked when it opens, and submitting a general TCLAS grant application with TEA. If you're referring to the e-grants, the e-grants is to make sure that you guys are all set up with the money to get that notice of grant award. I'm not too sure what else they're asking for you in that e-grant application specifically, but I believe that priority is to make sure that you're set up in e-grants to receive that NOGA. For the PTECH application on the website, it's more to collect more information, because on TCLAS, we actually only know if you have a higher ed partner, if you have a business partner, and what your career cluster is. To receive the best coaching, we want to make sure to get the entire vision of how you're going to open your PTECH Academy, which is why we're asking for more information on that. I mean, you're going to have the 2 years, but we want to make sure to get that information on the back end. So it's a little bit more in depth, but we definitely need that information to continue to support you. I'm happy to schedule any calls, Corpus Christi ISD, if you need to. Please send a question to the ptech@ta.texas.gov. I will follow up on that $400,000 award summary with our TCLAS leadership. You should be receiving a lump sum of $400,000. Oh, the awards summary. Just as a reminder, please make sure that on your award summary for 9A, B, and C, that it does say what the amounts will be on those specific line items. So during your planning period, you will have direct technical assistance, and they will be working with that LEA staff. So one of the questions was, will that be enough support during the planning period? A question we often get is, can you work with consultants? You're absolutely able to use the funding that you get for 6,200 in that class code for professional and consulted services on top of that, but that's your decision as a district to do so. You will be receiving support, not just from TEA, but from a technical assistance provider that we work with to give you one-on-one coaching. So keep that in mind. A lot of campuses want a lot more support if you're doing this for the first time. So you're absolutely allowed to use it for professional or consulting services. So there's a question about the next steps. I would make sure to look at some of the slides that we have in that next step section of this webinar. PTECH program will be sending out an email very soon with some more information on what you need to do for next steps. But as our application is currently closed for collecting more information, we'll let you know when that opens. So I'm a little bit over time. I believe that we will be posting some of the Q&A components. I'm going to get that budget guidance into the webinar before we go ahead and post it to the website. Please, again, feel free, if I didn't answer on camera, to send these questions to ptech@tea.texas.gov. I'm going to go ahead and leave the email up. You might also want to CC TCLAS@tea.texas.gov in case it is an e-grants or funding question. We want to make sure that they're aware of some of the questions that you all have set. So I'm going to leave this email up for a little bit more, but again, I want to thank you for staying on the line, even though we went over by a little bit. Wanted to make sure to get some of those questions answered. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you.